Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. My name is Mauricio Blandino, and I'll be your host today for today's segment. My special guest today is Michael Anderson, Achilles International Chapter Director and co-captain of Hoboken Harriers.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Mauricio. It's so great to be here.
Michael, I've always been interested in you as a runner. We've known each other now for a couple of years since you joined Achilles International. Now, tell me, how did you start running? When was it that you took those first few miles?
Well, Mauricio, running actually came to me in a weird way. I was a high school wrestler, and that was my favorite sport. I was a terrible runner, so much so that I had trouble getting through wrestling practice because we had a tough coach who would make us run a mile or two before every practice, and I found myself barely able to be getting through the runs. And the captain of our high school cross country and track team was a good friend of mine, and he said, "You want to get better at running, you should join the track team." I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of, but he was a good friend, and I put a lot of trust in him, and joined the track team. I was terrible, probably the worst runner on the team. Somehow he convinced me to join cross country, and that's when I started to fall in love with running. I grew up in Rochester, New York. And
what distance did you run?
It was a mile and 2 miler in track. It was usually coming off a wrestling season, so I was always hurt. But then after some rest, cross country, it was always 5K courses in the Rochester area, and that's just when I started to fall in love with running.
Fantastic. You moved to New York and then to Hoboken, where you live now, right?
Yeah, I've been in Hoboken about the last 8 years. I lived in Manhattan a good bit of time, and that was when I started running. I started running New York Roadrunners races about 20 years ago. I want to say it was around September of 2000.
What was your first race with Roadrunners?
It was the Fred LeBeau cross-country 5K up in Van Cortlandt Park. Yeah. We were talking about this the other day. Most runners don't pick a cross-country race for their first race.
Right,
but that was all I knew. I didn't know what a road race was, so I picked the cross-country. And
I guess you did well.
Well, my goal was to not finish in last place, and I didn't. I finished somewhere around 60th out of 250 runners, and I said that wasn't too bad. Nowhere near breaking 20 minutes like I used to regularly in high school, but those hills crushed me. But I realized that I was onto something good, and I really wanted to. That just reawoken my love for running.
Did you have a marathon in mind at that time?
No way. I thought marathon. I'm not a real runner. Marathons are for serious runners. These are for the serious competitors who are going after prize monies. That's what I thought at the time. I just thought, I'm not a marathoner, so let me stick to 5K, 5 miles, maybe even 10K. That was my mindset at the time.
And what took you beyond a 10K?
I had watched a couple friends of mine train for and run in the New York City Marathon. And one of them, my good friend Kevin White, he's a captain in the New York City Fire Department, darn good runner, and he and I would train together, and we would race together. And one day he just said, enough, you got to do this. You can handle the marathon. If you can handle the 10K, you're doing well. You're a marathoner. Get over yourself. And that's what convinced me to finally take the plunge and tackle the marathon.
How long did it take you to reach that plateau?
Well, I read a lot of Runner's World magazines. This was in the early pre-internet days, I guess, a little bit. Yeah. And I had Kevin and some other friends who I would consult for advice. And my first marathon was 2002, the Chicago Marathon. And luckily, I had a pretty good base built up and started training and pretty much trained the whole summer with a goal of breaking 3.5 hours.
And did you?
By 7 seconds, I got it.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. It was funny because I didn't have a stopwatch or a GPS or anything like that, so I just kind of was reading the time on the clock, and I had no idea what time I started. I was just kind of going on feeling, and I was pretty sure I could do it, and I did.
Well, let me just add that I did Chicago, and it didn't treat me well.
Oh,
but I finished.
It can be a tough, unforgiving course if the weather's bad.
It was a weather issue then.
Oh, yes. I lucked out. I had great weather my first one.
I'm sure that wasn't your last marathon there.
No, it wasn't. I had originally wanted to do the New York City Marathon, like every runner does. I mean, New York's, it's the greatest.
Yes.
I had applied for the drawing in 2001. I didn't get in, so that's why I decided the following year to do Chicago. But I, by that point, had started doing what is now known as the 9+1 thing, doing my weekly races. And I said, there's no way I am missing the New York City Marathon in 2003, and I got in and I started training. So New York became that next, hill to tackle, I guess.
Were you a solo runner then?
Yeah, I had my buddies that I trained with. Sometimes I would run with the Nike crew a little bit. They would meet at various Nike stores around the city. I trained with my roommates a little bit. But I was just trying to, I wasn't really officially coached. I was just kind of trying to figure things out at the time.
And as far as the Hoboken Harriers, when did you cross paths with them?
That came much later in my running career, I guess you could say. Late in 2011, after living in Manhattan about 14 years, I decided to cross the river to find a place with a little bit more elbow room for running along the Hudson, a little more space for my apartment, and a little cheaper rent. And that's when I moved to Hoboken. And I was new to town. I knew almost nobody. Didn't know what the good running routes were. So I decided to Google running clubs in Hoboken. That's when I found out about the Hoboken Harriers. I'd seen their name, Ho-Ha, before at races, so decided to join them.
Was that your first track club you joined?
Officially, yes. I had been working as a contractor at Google at that point, and I would run with my friends from Google, but it wasn't really an official New York City running club like Ho-Ha is. It was a wise decision because my running started really to improve when I was regularly running with a group of people, like-minded people. So we were talking yesterday, and I mentioned to you that after running my first marathon, I had read an article on ESPN's Page 2 by a writer named Bill Simmons about the Boston Marathon.
Tell us about Boston.
Well, I'd always heard of it, and I knew it was an event for serious runners, but I read this article online, and I said, this sounds like a blast. I have to do this. So I said, well, let me see. I'm not a good enough runner to qualify for Boston, but maybe there's a little pipe dream in there. I looked it up, and I saw what I needed to do to qualify. It was I needed to run a 3:10 marathon.
And how close were you then to that time?
I had run a 3:29 at Chicago, so I was far away.
Yeah, and I guess you started training for Boston.
I said, you know what? You never know unless you really go after it. And my first attempt was at New York, my first New York City Marathon, when I ran I think it was 3:26. So
Did you get it then?
No, not even close. I was off. But, I knew that I was improving, so I kept trying. So I started entering other marathons, Buffalo, Steamtown, New Jersey, and I just kept inching closer and closer, but I just kept coming short.
You were determined.
I was determined.
Man here.
In Buffalo, I was 51 seconds away. I know I'm going to get this. Something really cool happened. I was on a job interview to work as a freelance writer for the New York Roadrunners to cover their weekly races. Club races, semi-professional runners. I was interviewing with Gordon Bakulis. Gordon Bakulis, she's a former professional elite runner, and
Nice.
She's also the managing director of editorial content for the New York Roadrunners. Just a running legend, not just here in New York, but everywhere. So Gordon and I start talking, and she could see the frustration, and she said, I'm going to stop you here. Well, let's get out of job interview mode for a second. She said, I'm going to give you some advice. You're going to run Boston. And I said, well, she said, no. If you're this close, you're doing all the right things, you're just missing something out in your training, you're going to figure out what it is, and you're going to get there. And, well, there's a reason she's a legend. She was right. Made some good changes in my training, in my diet. On a beautiful November day, I finally qualified for Boston, and it was pretty awesome.
And from what I understand, you continue to run Boston.
Yes, I was lucky enough to qualify and then run the 2009 Boston Marathon. And it was a little windy, a a little cold, maybe a little rain at some point. I don't remember. I just remember being so happy to be there, to finally be lining up in that nice little New England town of Hopkinton and taking on this race. And I made the mistake a lot of runners do of there's a lot of downhill early, went out way too fast, paid for it later. You've been there, Mauricio. Everyone makes that mistake their first time.
Yeah, but happy to be in that in that place and time.
And if you ran in 2018, you survived the worst of the worst.
It made me a stronger runner for sure, mentally.
I love it.
Absolutely. I believe you have now run how many Bostons?
I've actually run the Boston Marathon 11 times in a row, and I'll be lining up along with you and a few others this year. So it'll be number 12.
Do you still need to qualify?
Yes. The BAA still requires, even if you've run 10 consecutive Boston Marathons, they still require that you qualify, but all you have to do is post a qualifying time, even if it's 1 second under once you hit that 10 in a row club. Even if you're 1 second under your qualifying time, they guarantee you an entry. So that's pretty cool.
It is. I know that you also coach.
Yes.
On a personal level with Hoboken Harriers. How interested now were you now in the coaching aspect of running?
So what happened was I joined the Hoboken Harriers, and the captain of the club at the time, he still is, Victor Matviv, very good runner. Just a really nice man, a really wonderful human being. It's funny how all the friendships in my life changed, and the Hohas became some of the closest friends in my lives. And so Victor and I started recruiting. We wanted to make the club better, and at the same time, I think I'd mentioned I was working as a contractor at Google, managing their events, and there was a coach and runner there, Raj Hathramani. You know Raj, he's an Achilles guide. Great guy. Raj, he was helping me, he was coaching me, helping me to improve as a runner, helping me to set PRs that I never thought were manageable. And at a certain point, Raj turned to me and said, I want you to join my coaching staff here at Google. And it was really cool. So Raj and I, as a team, started coaching Google employees, whether they were getting ready for their first 5K, trying a PR and a half marathon. We started coaching folks. We were getting them ready for a fundraiser race that they were doing to support Back on My Feet. And I realized at that time in my life that it was just something I loved, and I loved coaching runners more than anything else. It was starting to make me think, like, maybe I need a career change.
And you did make it.
Yes, I did.
Yes, fantastic, fantastic. Now, how did you come across Achilles? How did you find out about them?
So, I had always just been such a fan and admirer of Achilles. So, when I did my first New York City Marathon back in 2003, wasn't going quite as I planned. Here I was thinking, all right, I'm gonna run a Boston qualifying time. I'm gonna get close to that low 3-hour range, and just a combination of maybe not being trained right, the heat starting to creep up in that last 10K. It was going horribly. My just everything was in pain, just cramping and quads burning. It was awful, and I considered dropping out. I said, forget it. The Boston dream's out. Maybe I should drop out.
How does Achilles fit in there?
So I come across a runner who was actually kicking himself backwards in a wheelchair. And I later learned that his name is Bill Riley, and I saw him.
Backwards Bill.
Backwards Bill, as the legend has it. So I see Bill, and he's got a guide on either side of him, making sure he doesn't steer off course. Bill has CP, and darn it, nothing's stopping him. He's kicking himself backwards.
This is someone with challenges and moving on.
Yeah, and at that point, I ignored the pain and I pushed on, and I just became, at that point, just a fan of Achilles for life, and it just gave me tremendous pride anytime I did a race to see Achilles and to shout "Go Achilles," and I just loved Achilles International.
I was motivated myself by the actions and fortitude of the athletes at Achilles when I first joined. I was not in a good place myself, and to see these individuals with bigger challenges than I, taking hold of their lives and moving forward, and with no stopping them.
Yeah.
They would just charge through everything that's being thrown at them and finishing what they put themselves through.
Yeah.
I totally understand what you saw there.
So I had two good friends that were guides for Achilles International. One was my good friend and coach, Raj, and the other was another guy who I'd gotten to know at Google named Brian Murphy. Both of them amazing runners on their own, and they would often run as guides at the New York City Marathon for Achilles athletes. And both of them, they talked about Achilles with more pride than any PR that they set in any race or triathlon. That was when I made the decision. I said, all right,
I need to know these people.
I got to get to know Achilles. So I had qualified by time for the New York City Marathon in 2017, and I said, I'm not doing it. I want to get involved with Achilles. That was my attitude. So when I got the email from the Roadrunners asking me to register, I ignored it, and that's when I decided to look into what opportunities there were at Achilles International.
What did you apply for when you?
Well, I had read over the website. I had read over the website to see how to get involved as a volunteer, and I noted when the workouts were. And I said, all right, I'm going to see if I can what I can do to fit into my schedule. I was going on job interviews at the time, so that was a priority. So I said, all right, if this works and I don't have a job interview, I'm going to get out and I'm going to come out and volunteer for Achilles. So I came back from a particularly bad job interview. It was a freezing cold, rainy day. I came in, it didn't go well. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down and said, all right, I need to start looking at the next set of jobs. And I said, all right, let me take a little social media break and look on Facebook. And that's when I saw that runner named Toby Tanzer, who's a friend of a friend, had posted, hey, everyone, Achilles International is looking for a program director, New York City chapter leader. And I thought, this is awesome. This is what I want to do.
I'm qualified for it.
Yeah. I reached out to my good friend Terrence Kirchberg, who at the time was the executive director of Back on My Feet, and I texted him. I said, how well do you know Toby Tanzer? 2 seconds later, very well. What's up? Well, a couple days later, I'm sitting down to chat with Toby Tanzer and Dick Traum, and I was being interviewed for the position of New York City chapter director of Achilles International. I was hired a few days later.
And I remember you the first day you showed up at Achilles. Actually, I think I mentioned to you that I had seen you running in the park or cutting across 90th Street, and then I see you standing on one of the benches introducing yourself as our new director.
And that's what I love about the New York running community. I have actually forged some great friendships with people just from either seeing them out running, being in the same corral with them. So, one of us might edge each other out one race. And
it's a micro community of its own.
It's really amazing. And that's
just how like Achilles is.
Just like Achilles. So while I didn't get the opportunity to guide in the New York City Marathon, I did find a job that I have loved more than any other professional job that I've ever had in my life.
And I tell you, I welcome you to our, you as director. I've seen the great work you've done for the chapter as a director and a coach. We appreciate your time and effort that you give us. Absolutely.
I'm very fortunate to have met you and so many other people that made me feel welcome, whether it was you or Anthony Butler, Neil Biddy, just so many of our amazing runners from Achilles. I look forward to our Tuesday nights, our Saturday mornings. My favorite part of the week, getting out there to work with you all and to either run with you, provide coaching, leadership.
And you are coaching several of our athletes, aren't you?
Right now I am, and it's a part of the job that I just really love. Currently, we have 2 Achilles athletes in addition to yourself that are doing the Boston Marathon that I'm coaching. So they are Erwin Ramirez from the Achilles DC chapter and Melissa Bloom from the New York City chapter.
Erwin ran with the Achilles New York City
he did.
At
he
one
was
time.
Originally an Achilles New York guy. Yeah. I'm also coaching Hannah Gavios. She's doing the New York City Marathon. She's doing it on crutches, and she's moving. She's doing great. Neil Biddy, I mentioned earlier, I've also created a coaching plan plan for him, hoping he gets a PR. So it's what I really love, and I'm also proud to say that I will be not only coaching but guiding a runner as well, visually impaired runner named Bo Barley, doing his first half marathon. And here's the great thing, it all comes full circle. I mentioned Terrence Skirchberg's the guy that got me the job interview. Well, Terrence is going to be my fellow co-guide to help to guide.
And that's for the New York City half.
To help guide both the New York City half. And Terrence and I go back nearly 20 years.
And I believe I heard that you are going to be running London with an Achilles athlete from Toronto?
Yes, from London, Ontario, actually.
Ontario?
Yeah. This is another really cool story. So it was just about a month ago. I was as a coach, I'm required to have my CPR training up to date. So I was getting recertified, had a little break, checked my email. I get an email from a runner named Boyd Dunleavy from Canada, and he said, I woke up this morning and the song New York, New York was playing in my head. And I had been stressed because I hadn't been able to find a guide for the London Marathon. Your name popped into my head. Cool thing is, New York, New York, Frank Sinatra,
yeah.
Hoboken native. I live in Hoboken.
Oh, so that's a connection there.
A little connection there. Yeah, so I'm excited to be, so Boyd is a blood cancer survivor. As a result, he has a brain disorder causing balance issues, something, of course, you can relate to. And Boyd has asked me to be his guide, and I am honored. And this will actually be my 6th marathon major, as it turns out.
Are you completing the Abbott Marathon Majors races?
Well, first thing I have to do is successfully run alongside Boyd, make sure he's safe and gets to the finish line.
So you get credit.
But yes, the London Marathon has changed the rules in the last year or two. So support runners get credit for running the race. They get a medal, they get a finisher's time, their results, and they get a credit for one of their 6 marathon majors. So this will be my 6th one. Pretty cool.
So you'll be coming back with a second bling
with
there.
A giant piece of bling, yes. So I'll be sure to show it off.
Oh, I'll be expecting you to bring that to the first Achilles meetup. You
got it, Mauricio.
Now, let me ask you something about our good friend and founder of Achilles International, Dick Trump. How was your experience, your first meeting him? He's a comedian.
He is a comedian. It took me a minute to figure out, all right, is this guy messing with me? Is he? I walked away 5 minutes into the interview. I knew, all right, I like this guy. I like his humor. This guy cracks me up. Because what happened was he said, all right, Michael, what are you doing with yourself right now? And I said, well, right now I'm helping the folks at Back on My Feet plan their annual gala. And he said, I'm not familiar with Back on My Feet. And I said, oh, you're not? He goes, no, I'm actually a member of Back on My Foot. And for those that don't know, Dick Trump is an amputee, the first amputee to run the New York City Marathon, the founder of Achilles International.
Yes. That
was it. Right from then on, I said, I like this guy. And I was very lucky to have Dick as a mentor. What I would love is I'd come in the morning with my coffee, and I'd say, all right, Dick, we got to talk about a couple fundraising opportunities. And he'd say, how was your run this morning? And that's what I loved. He said, we'll get to that in a second. Tell me about your run. He loved talking running, whether it was a speed workout I had just done with the team or what have you.
I had the same experience too. He always wanted to know about my experiences with Achilles, my personal life, and everyone else I spoke to about him shared the same view too, that he was a genuine individual, always wanting to know about you, your efforts, and encourage you to move on.
Yeah. And that's the great thing just about Achilles and about what the organization does to empower, we like to say, anyone with any type of disability, barrier, disabling condition, whatever it is you want to call it, come join us.
And what are the various challenges that our athletes face?
A lot of people think, oh, Achilles, that's the organization where they support the blind runners, and that is true. But it is anyone with any disabling condition. You yourself have been on this show with Will talking about being someone with a traumatic brain injury and how Achilles has helped you
tremendously
overcome barriers and challenges.
And a handful of us who are also part of Achilles. Yeah.
Yes, those who, like our mutual friend Alan Kaufman, he's a cancer survivor, and after having been an Achilles guide for many years, he joined us as an Achilles Achilles athlete, using his trekking poles to get around. Parents bring their teenage runners who are on the spectrum to join us, many times starting out with the Achilles Kids program. We're welcoming of everybody. We provide that opportunity and provide those running supporters and guides and programming and coaching.
We have the hand cyclists, the Freedom team.
We have our Freedom team of wounded, injured, and ill veterans. We were talking earlier about Hope and Possibility. That's always one of my favorite races of the year. I still remember my first Hope and Possibility, seeing an amputee runner from the Freedom team carrying a brick across the finish line, and his name was Earl Granville, and it was cool. It's just like, why is he carrying this brick? It's a cinder block, actually, and he called it Cindy, and he said it represents the sorrows of all fallen soldiers and those who have committed suicide, and he just wanted to raise awareness of that. And
it's the most exciting race in Central Park. It
is.
Absolutely.
I encourage everybody, come out and run with us. Either volunteer with us at our workouts, run Hope and Possibility, shout Go Achilles when you see us.
How can volunteers find Achilles?
The easiest thing to do is visit our website, achillesinternational.org, click on the New York City chapter, and there's a very quick, easy online form you fill out. After you fill it out, just show up and join us. We meet Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. at Engineers Gate at 5th and 90th. Same location Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. There's also 2 really awesome chapters. One that meets on Thursday nights in Prospect Park. One that meets in your borough, home borough of Queens. Sunday mornings, 9 a.m.
Yes.
Flushing Meadow Park. Also, both of those chapters are thriving, and they are led by volunteers who are amazing. Nicolette and Rangus leads the Brooklyn chapter, and Wendy Pfaff leads the Queens chapter. Both have been on this show, actually. They beat me to the punch.
And we also have another close chapter in New Jersey.
In New Jersey, in Bergen County, led by Joe Sorbonelli.
Maplewood, is it?
Right next door, in Englewood. Incredible chapter. That Joe's doing an awesome job.
And as far as Achilles, I believe it's the largest running club in the world with the most...
We are the largest organization that provides opportunities for runners with disabilities. And yes, chapters all over the globe, probably around 40 chapters in the U.S.
That's awesome. Fantastic. So, Michael, is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Yeah, there's actually one last story. You asked me earlier what it is about joining the Hoboken Harriers that I loved so much. Well, the coolest thing was when I joined the Hoboken Harriers, I met my wife, who is now Antoinette Anderson. She's a runner. One Tuesday night, I saw her at a run, and I said, I have to get to know this person. She has an incredible energy. We ended up after the run, ended up talking for hours. I asked her out on our first date, which was right before the Hoboken Harriers Ho-Ha 5-mile Classic. I guess you could say the rest is history. We got married 3 years later, and we met through running. So I'm just,
that's fantastic.
That's the great thing about running is you never know who you're going to meet. It might lead to a marriage. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael, for being our guest today.
Thanks, Mauricio.
I would like to thank Manhattan Neighborhood Network and Will Sanchez for hosting us today.
Mauricio, that was awesome.